The metal vents rattled. The fluorescent tubes hummed unevenly, and something heavy shifted far below the concrete floor. Rain pressed against the exterior walls of Station S4 in thin, constant sheets, blurring the night cameras and forcing the security staff to rely almost entirely on audio. The facility had been undergoing decommissioning for years, leaving long corridors half-powered and whole sections sealed off with welded plates. Most nights passed in stale silence, broken only by the faint groan of settling steel or the magnetic lock cycling during shift changes. At 2:13, the internal alarm for Corridor B, an alarm that should no longer have been active, sent a single pulse across the guard desk. Nathan Hale, the only officer on overnight rotation, watched the monitor blink once and then freeze on a grainy frame of a door that hadn't been opened since 1998. Every technical report filed over the last decade repeated the same line: Tunnel 4B is sealed from both ends. No airflow, no access, no maintenance scheduled. Nathan listened. Beneath the rain and the hum of the dying lights, he heard it. A slow, weight-shifting step. Another. Then a pause long enough to make him think the sound had been imagined. Before he could decide, the facility's environmental mic near the sealed tunnel flickered to life, broadcasting a faint scrape like fabric brushing concrete. He checked the panel again. No motion registered. No door cycles logged. Yet the noise grew clearer, as if someone were walking deliberately inside a dead space that should have been airtight. Nathan keyed the internal radio to request verification, but static swallowed his voice. All three channels returned the same distortion, not sharp enough to be interference, not soft enough to ignore. It was as if the audio system had been partially rerouted through an older feed. Nathan retrieved the archived floor files from the cabinet beneath the desk. The box was heavy, filled with dust-coated binders and outdated maintenance diagrams. According to the schematics, Tunnel 4B had once housed a short utilities link between the east service shaft and an abandoned research wing. Both ends were collapsed after a structural failure. There was no remaining cavity large enough for a person to stand, let alone walk. The environmental mic crackled again. This time, the footstep landed with a slight metallic ring, almost like someone testing their weight on a ladder rung. Nathan felt the hair rise along his neck. He muted the speakers, waited 3 seconds, then unmuted them. The sound returned immediately, perfectly centered, perfectly timed, no lag, no drift, no looping artifact. He knew the protocol. Anything resembling unauthorized movement required physical confirmation, even in inactive sections. But the idea of descending into a sealed corridor on a night when the radios weren't behaving, when the lights were flickering irregularly, when the building itself seemed to be holding its breath, felt increasingly like a bad calculation carved into official procedure. Before he could decide whether to violate protocol or ignore a sound that refused to behave like a glitch, a low beeping emerged from the auxiliary monitor. It was the pressure sensor for the sealed hatch. The reading climbed by a fraction, barely enough to register, but unmistakably upward. Something inside the tunnel was displacing air that wasn't supposed to exist. Nathan stood, unholstered his flashlight, and moved toward the service stairwell. The corridor to the lower level smelled of warm dust and stagnant ventilation. As he descended, each step echoed too sharply, as if the building had become hollow in places he had never imagined. Halfway down, the lights dimmed to half intensity, then stabilized. At the base of the stairwell, he paused. The air around the old tunnel hatch felt colder, slightly pressurized, as though the sealed corridor beyond it held a depth he couldn't sense, but could feel pulling at the edges of perception. He raised the flashlight toward the welded seams. The metal looked normal, unbroken. Then another footstep rang out behind the hatch, closer, heavier, deliberate. Nathan leaned in, listening. The next sound wasn't a step, but a faint click, like a mechanical latch shifting somewhere deep in the dark. The cold air pressed against Nathan's face as he knelt near the hatch, his flashlight trembling slightly against his grip. The welded seams caught the beam in dull streaks, and for a moment he saw nothing more than rust and years of dust. Then the metal shifted again, not outward, not inward, but along its own plane. A subtle internal vibration running through the bolts like something adjusting on the far side. He placed his palm flat against the surface. It felt dry, cold, inert. But underneath, a second rhythm pulsed faintly, almost like machinery waking after decades of dormancy. Nathan pulled his hand away and checked the pressure sensor mounted to the wall. The readings had risen another incremental point, too controlled to be natural, too gentle to indicate a collapse. A dull thump rolled through the metal. Not footsteps this time, more like an object being set down with care. Nathan swept his flashlight across the corridor. Nothing moved. The pipes overhead exhaled a weak gust of air, stirring the dust along the floor. The facility's old wiring crackled behind the walls in slow, uneven pops. He scanned the ceiling next. A faint trail of condensation snaked along one of the conduits connected indirectly to the sealed tunnel. It shouldn't have been carrying anything. Every diagram said it was capped. Yet fresh droplets slid down its side and fell silently to the concrete. He stepped back and radioed again. Static swallowed the call, but within the static, he caught a tiny modulation, as if someone else were trying to speak through a layered, older frequency. He adjusted the knob, isolating the signal until he could identify it. Not speech, not electrical noise. It was the faint hiss of environmental mics recorded audio from somewhere else in the building, playing back at a lag he couldn't measure. Then the hatch emitted a soft crack. A bolt rotated a fraction of a degree, metal grinding metal in a restrained, almost hesitant motion. Nathan flinched. He shone the beam directly at the bolt. It didn't move again, but now he could see an almost imperceptible alignment mark. Beside it, a shallow scratch he didn't remember seeing before, as if someone had scraped a tool against the metal from the inside. He crouched lower, searching for airflow. For a moment, he thought he felt warmth seeping through a seam near the base, but the sensation vanished as quickly as it arrived, replaced by the same cold pressure he'd felt upon entering the corridor. A sudden thud echoed from deep within the tunnel, distant yet resonant, like something striking a long metal surface far underground. The corridor lights dimmed in sync with the sound, then returned to normal. Nathan stepped back instinctively, flashlight sweeping the darkness with wider arcs now. He considered retreating to the desk, calling in a full sweep team, locking down the floor. But protocol insisted on confirming the origin of any structural anomaly before escalating. And something about the hatch, a tiny detail he kept circling back to in his mind, refused to let him walk away. The alignment mark, the shifting pressure, the controlled sounds. None of it felt like a collapse. He leaned close again, listening. A new noise emerged, softer than a whisper, fabric brushing against metal, moving steadily toward the hatch. Then it stopped. Nathan retreated a single step, angling the flashlight upward as the environmental mic above the hatch clicked on by itself. Its tiny indicator light glowed a weak orange, the color used in the 90s before the facility upgraded. The system shouldn't even have been able to access that light mode anymore. A thin hiss spilled from the corridor speakers, followed by a low, irregular pulse. Not breathing, not machinery. More like a shifting of weight passing through a narrow space, as if something were turning sideways to navigate a constriction. The signal fluctuated, stabilizing for a moment before distorting again into a clipped fragment of audio. Nathan held his breath. A faint voice emerged. Not words too muffled, too broken, but the intonation was unmistakably human. A short exhale, then a strained sequence of sounds as if someone were trying to speak while moving against resistance. The mic captured a scrape, then another. Nathan checked the live feed on the portable monitor clipped to his belt. The audio source registered from inside the sealed tunnel, pinpointed to a junction point that the original engineers had described as structurally inaccessible. The hiss deepened. The mic cut out. Then it snapped back with startling clarity. A metallic tapping pattern began. 3 knocks, a pause, then 2 lighter taps. Repeated once, then silence. Nathan recognized it not as a code, but as the kind of signal-heavy equipment operators use during maintenance to confirm that a line was clear. But no one had done maintenance here in decades, and the tone of the taps carried something too careful, too precise, like someone testing the responsiveness of the metal between them and open air. He turned the flashlight toward the ceiling again. The condensation on the capped conduit had thickened, droplets running faster now, leaving faint streaks down the paint. The ambient temperature dropped another degree. Nathan's breath no longer fogged, but a dry chill clamped around his jaw and shoulders. Another crackle from the mic. This time, the signal split into 2 channels, left and right, though the system hadn't used stereo since the early 2000s. The left channel reproduced the faint scraping of fabric. The right carried a new sound, a slow inhale, uneven and halted midway, like someone pausing to listen through metal. Nathan stiffened. The next noise wasn't from the mic. It was from behind him. A subtle shift of weight on the upper stairwell landing. A vibration traveling down the metal rails. He spun the flashlight upward. Nothing. No movement. No shadows. The mic above the hatch activated again, this time broadcasting a faint mechanical relay snapping open somewhere deep inside the walls. The sound bounced with unexpected clarity, as though the entire facility had become a conduit for whatever was moving beneath. Nathan stepped closer to the hatch, drawn by something he couldn't name. He placed his ear near the cold metal. A single deliberate knock struck the other side, perfectly aligned with his position. He froze. The speakers cut instantly, and the corridor plunged into a silence so complete that even the distant hum of power systems seemed to vanish. Nathan remained still, listening for the return of any sound at all. Nothing came. Then the hatch vibrated once sharp, mechanical, controlled, as if acknowledging his presence. The vibration faded, but its echo traveled through the concrete like something searching for contour. Nathan stepped back, forcing his breathing to steady. The corridor lights pulsed once, dimmed to half strength, then resolved into a steady glow that seemed too warm for the space. He tightened his grip on the flashlight and scanned the floor. A thin line of dust had formed a crescent shape around the base of the hatch. It hadn't been there minutes ago. The dust wasn't disturbed outward, as it would be if something pushed from inside, but drawn inward toward the seam, as though air had moved subtly into the tunnel rather than out of it. He crouched and touched the floor. The concrete vibrated again, faintly, like a slow-moving piece of machinery shifting its weight somewhere deep underground. The vibration drifted left, traveled beneath the corridor wall, and stopped directly under the capped conduit. More droplets slid down the metal, collecting at its base until small, muddy puddles formed in the cracks between tiles. Nathan stood and followed the vibration trail with the flashlight, tracing it as it moved in irregular pulses toward the service panel at the end of the hall. The panel was locked with a corroded mechanical latch, the kind that hadn't been used since the facility upgraded to mag seals. He approached it cautiously. A faint mechanical hum bled through the metal. Not electrical, not rotational. Something slower, more deliberate. The hum rose by a fraction, then cut abruptly as if someone had pressed a stop switch. Nathan placed his ear against the panel. Inside, something shifted. He flinched as the service panel latch twitched. It didn't open, but it moved exactly 1 millimeter enough for the metal to click softly against its housing. Nathan stepped back. He checked the corridor again. convinced a living person had to be somewhere nearby. But the air remained still, the dust undisturbed, the lights unwavering. The environmental mic above the hatch crackled again, but this time the signal didn't transmit from the sealed tunnel. It broadcast a feed from somewhere else on the same level, a location that didn't exist on any currently active map. A soft, rhythmic dragging sound came through the speakers, followed by a hollow metallic bump. Nathan recognized the acoustics immediately. The old East Service Junction, a space that had been collapsed 15 years ago. The mic feed cut mid-drag. The corridor returned to silence. He turned back toward the hatch, uneasy. A new detail had appeared along the metal, something he couldn't have missed earlier. A small depression near the base, no larger than a thumbnail, as if the metal had flexed inward under concentrated pressure. Nathan lifted the flashlight, checking for stress marks. The metal was smooth. The floor vibrated again, stronger this time. A sharp crack echoed from beneath him, followed by a soft plume of dust rising from a seam in the tiles that had never shown signs of strain. Nathan stepped back as the vibration intensified, then traveled in a straight line toward the hatch, stopping exactly at the center. He felt the air tighten around him. Then, with surgical precision, one bolt on the hatch rotated a full quarter turn. Not outward, not inward, just enough to show it was no longer fixed. Nathan's pulse hammered against his ribs as the bolt settled into its new position. The hatch didn't open, but the gesture felt intentional, measured, controlled. He backed away slowly, keeping the flashlight trained on the metal. Nothing else moved. A faint electrical tick rose behind him. He turned toward the service panel again. The corroded latch twitched once more, this time accompanied by a soft relay snap deeper inside the wall. Another snap followed, then another, as if a dormant circuit were waking along a buried line. He edged closer. The air around the panel felt warmer than the rest of the corridor. He placed his palm against the metal. A dull vibration pulsed through it, steady, cyclical, like a component calibrating itself after years of inactivity. The relay snapped again, louder. A second vibration joined the first, this one coming from behind the corridor wall on the opposite side. The two vibrations sensed for a moment, then fell out of rhythm, drifting into an unsettling stagger that made the floor beneath him thrum unevenly. Nathan stepped back, scanning the corridor for any sign of structural failure. The tiles held. The lights remained steady, but the pipes overhead emitted a faint groaning sound, shifting slightly as if a current of air had begun traveling through them for the first time in years. He checked the pressure gauge beside the hatch. The reading had climbed again, not sharply, not dangerously, but steadily following a pattern too smooth to be natural. The environmental mic above him activated with a clipped pop. The speakers projected a faint rustling noise, followed by a short burst of static. Then the feed resolved into a distinct sound, slow, careful breathing mixed with the quiet scrape of something brushing a narrow surface. Nathan swallowed hard. A second audio channel activated, this one from deeper inside the tunnel system. It carried a dull, repeating knock, spaced evenly apart. Not a pattern he recognized, not mechanical. More like someone tapping their knuckles against a length of metal pipe while walking. The breathing grew louder, then suddenly cut out. The knock continued, one tap every 3 seconds. He turned toward the hatch again. The beam of his flashlight shook across the metal as a new vibration rolled through the floor, this one directional and moving toward him from the far end of the corridor. It passed beneath his boots like a slow pulse. The dust along the tiles trembled. Nathan steadied himself. Then the corridor lights surged to full brightness, far brighter than their aging power lines should have allowed, casting long, sharp shadows along the floor. Every surface looked harsher, more defined, the imperfections in the walls suddenly exposed. The The service panel latch snapped fully into a release position. The metal door didn't open, but the latch now hung loose, as if something from inside had pushed it just shy of unlocking. Nathan stepped back again. Behind the wall, something shifted solid, heavy, purposeful. The shift behind the wall continued a slow drag of weight across an unseen surface, halting every few seconds as if navigating an irregular path. Nathan pressed himself against the opposite wall, breath shallow, flashlight trembling in his grip. The corridor's bright lights steadied, but a faint quiver in their filament revealed a pressure change rolling through the air. The environmental mic clicked on again, unprompted. No hiss this time, no static, just a hollow, open-air resonance that made Nathan's stomach tighten. It was the unmistakable acoustics of a much larger space than any registered tunnel beneath S4. A cavernous echo, faint but real, like sound traveling across a distance the building shouldn't contain. He checked the pressure gauge. The needle lifted another millimeter. The relay inside the service panel ticked twice, then fell silent. Nathan approached cautiously. A narrow sliver of warm air leaked through the seam, rising in weak pulses, carrying a smell he couldn't place dry, metallic, but not dust. More like the scent of overheated wiring, buried deep where airflow never reached. He touched the seam with 2 fingertips. Warm, but steady, not rising, not dangerous, controlled. He swung the flashlight toward the hatch again, uneasy. The rotated bolt had not moved further, but the metal around it strained slightly inward, barely visible unless the beam hit it at the right angle. The pressure gauge twitched. The floor beneath him vibrated once, strongly then settled into stillness. Nathan took 1 step closer to the hatch. The environmental mic captured a new sound, a distant clang, like a metal door swinging on a chain, followed by a faint, rhythmic squeak of hinges, older than anything still in use. Nathan adjusted the portable monitor. It identified the source as coming from somewhere meters beyond the sealed tunnel's end past what should have been a collapsed shaft filled with infill concrete. A soft scrape whispered across the speakers. Something brushing a narrow corridor wall. Slow, deliberate progress. Nathan backed away, but the floor trembled again, this time under the service panel. The vibration stopped abruptly. Then a second vibration answered from the hatch, deeper, more resonant, like a mass shifting its center of gravity. The corridor lights flickered, dimmed to a warm amber glow, and held there. A single spark snapped inside the panel beside him. The loose latch quivered. He lifted the flashlight. A small fragment of tile at the base of the service panel slid outward by a fraction, not popped loose, not cracked, shifted, as if nudged from behind. Nathan crouched, peered closer. The panel's bottom edge had separated from the wall by the width of a fingernail. A sliver of darkness showed beyond it, not the expected tangle of pipes, not wiring, just a dark, open pocket where solid concrete should have been. He reached toward it, hesitated, and swept the beam inside. The light caught metal, not utilities, not support braces. A section of rail-old, industrial, long unused curving downward into a narrow void that extended farther than his beam could reach. The breathing returned on the mic, slow, controlled, closer than before. Nathan rose to his feet. Something inside that hidden space shifted again, sending a faint metallic echo up the rail. Then, from deep within the sealed tunnel, a single knock answered it, precise, synchronized. The hatch exhaled a soft pulse of warm air. The warm pulse faded quickly, leaving the corridor colder than before. Nathan steadied himself, sweeping the flashlight from the hatch to the exposed sliver beneath the service panel. The rail gleamed faintly in the beam curved, dustless in places, as if something had moved along it recently. The void beyond it breathed a quiet resonance that felt impossibly deep for a building that, on paper, had no sublevels between S4 and the bedrock. He crouched again, lowering the beam farther into the gap. The rail vanished down a steep incline, its surface worn smooth by years of friction. Beside it, a narrow stripe of exposed metal formed a shallow groove thin enough for a cable or small wheel assembly. The air rising from the space carried the same dry, heated scent he'd detected earlier, faint but insistent, like a machine left on standby. A metallic thunk echoed through the void, traveling up the rail with unsettling clarity. Nathan jerked back. The vibration reached the floor beneath him, faint but direct, making the tiles shift against their grout lines with an almost granular sound. The environmental mic above the hatch crackled to life again. The breathing was closer now, less muffled. A soft shuffle followed, fabric dragging lightly against a narrow wall. Then a subtle metallic ring, like the brushing of a tool against a rail. Nathan's gaze snapped to the hatch. The rotated bolt twitched. Not a full movement, just a tiny click forward, as if acknowledging something happening below the floor. The pressure gauge ticked upward. A clank sounded behind the wall to his left, this one sharper, metallic layers shifting under strain. The relay inside the hidden circuit snapped twice in rapid succession. The corridor lights dimmed, flickered, then stabilized into a cold, clinical white. Nathan approached the service panel, drawn by the void he didn't want to see. He wedged his fingers beneath the loose corner of the tile fragment. It lifted with almost no resistance. The gap widened by a few millimeters. Warm air poured out. A low, distant mechanical whir rose from deep within the hole. Slow at first, then rising into a steady rotation, something spooling up. A faint vibration traveled through the rail, syncing with the whir in a rhythm too precise to be accidental. Suddenly, the mic cut out. Total silence. Nathan held his breath. A burst of static erupted from the speakers, sharp and distorted, followed by a clipped recording he recognized instantly. His own voice from earlier in the night, a fragment of a phrase he'd spoken over the malfunctioning radio. Confirming movement B section, the playback looped once, then stopped. The rail below him vibrated strongly, as though carrying weight. Nathan backed away, and the hatch behind him emitted a deep, hollow boom. Not something hitting it, something shifting behind it. He spun. The hatch surface flexed inward by the width of a breath, then returned to shape with a metallic groan. Dust sifted down the corridor walls. The pressure gauge climbed another increment. Nathan gripped the flashlight tighter. The service panel latch dropped fully open. The panel door eased forward on its own. A long exhale drifted from the darkness behind it. The exhale rose from the opened panel in a slow, steady draft, warmer than the rest of the corridor and thick with the scent of old steel. Nathan stepped back, forcing himself not to turn toward the hatch, even as it hummed with a low, internal strain. The panel door, freed from its latch, creaked outward by another inch. The rail beneath the floor glimmered faintly as the warm air swept across it, rising in thin currents that carried a soft, rhythmic vibration. Nathan swept the flashlight into the opening. A narrow service chamber stretched behind the panel, much deeper than any blueprint suggested. Cable brackets lined the walls, some empty, others holding frayed remnants of thick industrial wiring. The chamber descended at a slight angle, following the rail's curve. Far below, a faint red glow pulsed every few seconds, bathing the metal surfaces in a dim heartbeat of light. A soft scrape echoed up the incline. Nathan froze. Not machinery, not shifting debris. Footsteps, slow, careful, measured, moving upward along the rail. He turned toward the hatch. Its seams tightened subtly, as if responding. The environmental mic snapped on again, capturing a dull clank from deep within the sealed tunnel, followed by the unmistakable sound of weight settling onto metal. The two sources were in sync. Nathan raised the flashlight again, angling it down the hidden chamber. The red glow pulsed, then dimmed. The footsteps paused. A faint whisper of fabric brushed against a wall that shouldn't exist. He stepped back, pulse hammering. The corridor lights flickered. The pressure gauge spiked and steadied at a level the sensors weren't calibrated to display. The hatch shuddered. The footsteps resumed, this time closer, clearer. Something descended against the incline 1 foot, sliding for purchase, the other landing with quiet, deliberate weight. A slight metallic clink followed, like a small tool striking the rail. Nathan gripped the flashlight with both hands. A soft tapping sounded through the wall near his shoulder. Two slow, evenly spaced knocks. The relay behind the panel activated in response. The red glow pulsed again, brighter this time, illuminating a section of the chamber far below. And in that brief flare of light, Nathan saw movement. A silhouette, broad shoulders, bent posture, one hand sliding along the rail for balance. The figure paused, head tilted upward not toward him, but toward the hatch behind him, as though listening to the same deep pulse radiating through the concrete. The light dimmed. The footsteps continued upward. Nathan backed toward the stairwell, torn between retreat and watching the chamber. The corridor air tightened around him. The pipes overhead creaked. The environmental mic flickered with faint static, then captured a new sound breathing from inside the sealed tunnel, closer than it had ever been. He turned toward the hatch. A second bolt rotated, slowly, precisely, deliberately. The seam widened by a fraction, releasing a warm thread of air that drifted across the floor toward the open service panel. Nathan stepped away, breath caught in his throat, flashlight shaking. The footsteps reached the top of the hidden chamber. The breathing behind the hatch deepened. For a moment, both sounds aligned perfectly, two presences on opposite sides of passages that should have been sealed forever. The corridor lights dimmed to a dull glow. Nathan held still. Something stopped inches behind the panel door. Something else shifted inches behind the hatch. And for a brief, impossible second, the concrete between them hummed, as if the two voids, both sealed, both forgotten, both impossibly active, were no longer separate at all. The pressure gauge needle jerked downward. The breathing cut out. The footsteps stopped. The corridor fell silent. But the warm air continued to rise from both the panel and the hatch in slow, steady pulses, unbroken, synchronized, and far too deliberate to be anything the building was designed to produce.